worried that you might be the cool kid? You wear the latest fashions on top of all the trends. Or have you ever worried you were too much in the mainstream? Always so generic, more normal than your friends. Well, we've devised a test to put to rest your fears. There's no need to panic if you lend us your ears. Tonight you can't sleep easy after all that you've heard. Cause if you like the show, then you're probably a nerd. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all Canon, oh Canon, it's Canon with Tyler, Phil, and Boris. Oh Canon, it's Canon, it's all in Canon.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the It's Canon podcast. It is Monday, and you know what that means. It's Mando Monday. It's the day where we analyze, review, talk about The Mandalorian and all things Mandalorian and all things Star Wars. That's right. I'm your host, I'm Boris, and this week I'm joined by Phil.
Hey everybody, how you doing out there? I hope everybody is safe.
Exactly, and every week we are joined by a special guest, and this week is no different as we are joined by Ben Woerner.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for reaching out, and here we are ready to talk about all things Mandalorian. And I gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised because, you know, as we were planning for this show, as we were bringing and booking guests, we were also taking a look at the episodes and who was directing them. And, you know, after last week's big shocker and everything that happened, and knowing that Dave Filoni is going to be directing Thursday's episode, I was under the impression that this week's episode was going to be nothing more than a Freak of the Week placeholder type episode. And I gotta say that I was very pleasantly surprised. I was super happy that we got the episode that we ended up with, and I can't wait to just start chatting all things Mandalorian. So Phil, why don't you take it over and chat all things Mandalorian? Here we go.
Hey everybody, so we have The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 4, Chapter 12, which Boris craftily dodged. So I'm very happy that this episode has come up, and I'm very, very happy to have our guest with us, Ben. Ben, why don't you let us know a little bit about yourself and what it is you do?
Sure. I'm a role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game writer and designer. I have written and designed a bunch of games my own and freelanced. Everything from like samurai noir role-playing games to stuffed animals. I've written for Warhammer 40k and Scion and the Tiny D6 system, and currently I'm working as a writer on the Dune role-playing game.
Oh, that's so amazing. I'm so happy whenever we have someone who's in the industry, a creative. It just, I just think it's great, and we should all make sure that we support Ben in our personal lives and our personal purchases to make sure and enjoy these RPG games, because they really do make a huge difference, as we found out a couple weeks ago when we had our guest who did a lot of contribution to the Star Wars role-playing game sequences. So yeah, so we're here today to discuss The Mandalorian. And what did we all think of Friday's episode? Boris?
Well, I guess, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I honestly thought it was going to be a placeholder Freak of the Week type episode, but I was super happy with what we actually got. You know, I think they totally did this on purpose. I feel, you know, knowing that kind of, you know, they obviously do their planning. They knew who was going to be directing the next episode. They took a look at it, you know, in regards to timing, and I think that they assumed that many of us would be assuming that this week was going to be just that, but we got everything, but we got some pretty major reveals, some, you know, we got some Legends canon coming into the new canon, so I'm really super excited to kind of talk about some of what we saw, and overall I gotta give 2 thumbs way the F up.
Nice. And Ben, what did you make of this week's episode?
I was definitely way up with the two thumbs. My arms were all the way up in the air on the final shot. And I was making incomprehensible noises, just like as the scene ended, and my family was all staring at me like, what's going on? So that was a pretty awesome bit for me. I'm getting chills again, just like thinking about that moment and being like, oh my gosh, I never thought that they would do something like that. So I'm pretty excited about bringing those sort of things into the new canon.
Yeah,
So.
I definitely think that we got a little bit of a setup there, which was definitely hitting us a side hook on us, because I don't think anybody could have called what happened at the end, and it was really difficult to see. I know with a lot of the new modern TVs and monitors out there, they're calibrated so dark in order to get that cinematic experience that it was difficult to discern. But once you did a little bit of tinkering with the images that you saw, you could start to piece together, and then with the described audio as well, there's a bunch of different tricks. And yeah, just for me, it was a 2 thumbs up episode, way up, for the reasons that both of you have stated. I was hopeful that I knew that this episode was an inevitability, as in last week we talked about it, and I mentioned that I think that the Razor Crest is going to need to be fixed. I think that it's definitely not going to be just jumping into the Ahsoka show, and knowing that Dave Filoni is directing the next episode. I think that that's his contribution beyond all the love that he shows Star Wars, to be the guy who ushers in live action Ahsoka on screen, considering it's his character.
Phil, before you move on, and sorry for disrupting you, but I feel like this needs to be said, just because, hindsight is 2020, and I just want to make sure that a lot of people were on the same boat. Remember when Ahsoka was one of the most hated, vile characters in the Star Wars universe?
Man, that movie made me hate her so much. That Clone Wars animated atrocity started off the Clone Wars. What did you think of that movie, Ben?
So it's funny because we just watched it last week. Wow. Because my wife had never seen the Clone Wars. We've all seen Rebels together, and that first so it reminded me of the mini movie episodes of the Rebels, like, because it was definitely clunky, and oh my gosh, the animation was rough. But I mean, it's that era, so they were, they did as well as they could at that time. But she was definitely not as well fleshed out or as interesting as, and they made some strange choices. Like, even my wife who's generally likes the cute stuff, was like, R2E? Is that what she's going with? As far as her calling R2D2, with nicknames and stuff like that. And yeah, but I've watched the entire series, so I'm a huge fan. I don't think I hated her. I think what I didn't like about that movie was just like the writing and the plotting a lot. I think the dialogue was really rough too. But I mean, it's the beginning of a new series, and I made my way through the first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So, I think I can sit through just about anything and survive.
That's true. Yeah, and it really showed that it was a little rough around the edges, but it had this idea, and I'm so glad that Dave Filoni and the team got to spend the time and the seasons that they did, because by the end of season 7, I think her arc, even though I felt like that arc was a little bit, I don't know, of a letdown in the story, the final 4 episodes where she's bringing in the climax for the Clone Wars was just absolutely perfect and fitting. And I just was had so much, it's to the point where I'm buying the young adult books for Ahsoka and things like that. And I'm so invested in that character. And that's a true, just hats off to Dave Filoni and the team for making such a huge character and now taking it to that next level, which is going to be next week. But really, we have to worry about this week's episode, The Siege, directed by Excellent. You've got the book too.
I literally just finally picked it up 2 nights ago. I went to my friendly local game store, and they had it there, and I was like, what? And I picked that up.
It's sometimes, you know what, I have the audiobook of it as well. I usually buy one for my shelf and one for my personal enjoyment, and the audiobook was fantastic. It was narrated by Ashley Eckstein, and it's
sweet.
just amazing to hear her voicing the character and doing it all.
She's an excellent voice actor.
Yeah, she absolutely a sweetheart. Like, I'm so disappointed that she's not going to be actually Ahsoka, but I get it.
It's like I mean, oh my gosh, I just forgot her name. Bo-Katan's no, but Bo-Katan's actor, Katie Sackhoff, right? Like they made Bo-Katan look like Katie Sackhoff, so that that's fine. That's great because she's a good actor. But Ahsoka doesn't look as much, like
no.
Yeah,
but it's such a visceral thing for me is hearing her voice. It's such an important part of knowing that character. So it's gonna be a little bit jarring, I think, hearing possibly. I don't know how they're gonna tackle it, and that's gonna be the pleasure of next week.
True.
So, we've got this episode directed by Carl Weathers, who I think did a fantastic job and made some different choices than I was expecting, and definitely could see his fingerprints on this episode as a director.
For certain, yeah.
A lot of falling stormtroopers.
Yeah.
He's very fond of that. We go immediately to the opening scene with that sound of the Millennium Falcon kind of makes when stuff's not working. And we know that the Razor Crest is in a lot of trouble. And here we have the child trying to mess with wires. And again, the Mandalorian interacting with the child verbally and having the child understand him. So the communication is getting good. It's also very comedic, and it was also very baby Groot.
Yeah.
So what did you think, Boris? Like,
I gotta say that scene made me laugh a little bit. I really enjoyed it overall. I didn't think at first. I'm like, oh god, this is dumb. But as they kept doing the back and forth with plug the blue where the red was, or whatever he was saying, it worked out really well. I actually really enjoyed it. And for a puppet, that Baby Yoda can act.
Yeah, it's getting chops, man. It's getting chops. What do you think, Ben?
Agreed. I thought that was a hilarious scene and very much Baby Groot inside that like tunnel in the second Guardians of the Galaxy scene. Like that was like immediately in my head, and I think it was the same sort of thing with the rest of my family when we were watching that. And I don't remember who said it, but someone when Baby Yoda like got shocked, they're like karma from the last episode.
Yep, exactly.
But
so
I mean,
funny.
It was cute and fun and light. So
and I just love that when he says "don't touch them," and then you see his head turn, and it's like, I'm gonna touch them.
Yeah,
exactly.
The whole symbolic thing that wasn't lost on me. That one wire's blue and one wire's red.
Right.
Like, I was just like, is that Star Wars or what? And the two are drawn together by this seemingly neutral little Force user.
Yeah.
And he's gonna get the consequence of that as well. Like, what happens when you cross blue and red? So I couldn't help but think that there was, even in that comedic moment, there was a little bit of people really geeking out on some themes. In the background.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder how much it is foreshadowing versus how much it's just them fucking with, like, us geeks who are literally going frame by frame trying to catch things.
Yeah, that's like my deepest reach ever.
Yeah. But you know what? Here's the thing. And I always laugh at this, Ben, with Phil. It's that every week we do these episodes, and each episode of The Mandalorian, outside of episode number 1, was about 40 minutes. Our average episode length for this show is about 60 to 90 minutes. So it's like, we spend more time analyzing and discussing the episode than the actual episode itself. And I just find that hilarious and sad all at once. And amazing.
I mean, I love it. I think it's pretty great to... Yeah. My mother used to give me a hard time because I would, spend, as a 10-year-old, I'd spend 4 hours, telling her about a 2-hour movie that I just watched.
There you go.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the funny thing, though, is about it, because when you watch the condensed stuff on YouTube and whatnot, the analysis, a lot of the times that's just a single person like rifling stuff at your ears. It's a full-on assault of data without conjecture. And I love the fact that we have this forum to discuss it and to get to places that maybe you don't get to when you're following a script.
Yeah,
and
right.
that's the important part about enjoying this type of stuff, especially in, as we all know, the world that we live in right now with lockdowns and pandemics and things like that. It's just amazing.
Right.
So,
Now,
It
Phil,
is, yeah.
to that point, how do you watch this show? Because, like, I watch it once, Friday morning, Thursday night, because I have to. I'm insane that way. I have to watch it as soon as it comes out. So I watch it once then, and then I watch it at least once more before we do this show, so that I can actually, see it in my angle, it being a analyst, a podcast host. How do you watch this show?
Well, you guys have ruined it for me. I'm going to say that. It used to be, all right, 13-year-old me watches Star Wars and gets so excited, and I still do. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't. I get so excited, and I do my first watch through Friday. And then maybe I watch it, I don't know, about 2 or 3 more times as the workday finishes. I might fire it up at night, throw it on my 55-inch 4K screen, with the sound and everything, and just kind of go through the theatrical experience, if you will. But then Saturday comes, and Saturday is business me. And it's my one day where I don't have any obligation. I'm not recording a podcast. I'm not doing anything but pulling up the episode and probably watching it another 6 to 10 times at various points. I'm fast forwarding and whatnot. Like there are specific things I want to go see. And then I have to watch it with subtitles. I have to watch it with described audio. I have to go through it with, altering some contrast levels, things like that to dig details out if the episode warrants it. Sometimes, like the spider episode was just a cinematic spider episode for me. So I didn't really need to overthink it. This week's episode was a bit of a challenge, as Ben has pointed out, and you have as well, that there was some really subtle things happening in it, and they needed to be investigated. Wasn't as many as I thought. I was a little bit more worried about it originally. How do you watch all this, Ben?
So when the first season came out, I was watching it, the second it dropped at, Thursday in the middle of the night, going into Friday morning. And then I tried to convince my family to watch it with me, then on Friday in the evening. And then after a couple episodes of that, it became we're watching this every Friday at dinner, like right after dinner sort of thing. As a family, we have to watch it, together. And so I kind of stopped watching it like late Thursday night, but every once in a while someone would be like, "Hey, you have to see this," or "Oh my gosh," and I'd be like, "Ah," and then I just watch it. You know? But actually, the spider episode, I have a couple of friends who are arachnophobic, and so one of my friends mentioned to me that there's spiders in this episode. So I went and actually watched it because I knew one of my friends that liked to watch it, who's arachnophobic, like on the Thursday night. So I went and watched it immediately. And I sent them a warning. I'm like, hold on, don't watch it yet. And then I sent him the timestamps. And, I was like, so it's from here to here. And they were like, oh my gosh, thank you. So they went and watched that episode with I think their girlfriend. And they were like, I'm going to walk out of the room during this period of time in the episode. And then once it's over, But yeah, so I generally watch it on Friday nights with the family. And then if it's an episode I've really enjoyed, I'm definitely going to watch it again Saturday, maybe Sunday. And I think I've watched every episode at least twice. So even like the ones that were not as green for me, I've watched them probably again on a Saturday or Sunday.
Yep.
That's awesome. I love that with the spiders. You see, you're so fortunate because you're on the West Coast. So it's a midnight thing for you. The thing that kills me is like Boris waits until 3 a.m. our time before he gets a shot at it. And I'm like, nope. I got to go to work the next day, even if it's working from home. And we're just going to slide that in and avoid social media whenever I can during the day on Friday.
But that's the difference
Right.
between me and you, Phil. As you know, Phil, I barely sleep, if at all. So it's just another Thursday night for me. Usually playing video games, reading something, and then I look at the clock. It's like 2:50. I'm like, all right, and then I'm literally like refreshing Disney Plus every couple minutes. It's the most pathetic, sad thing that I can humanly do, but I love every second of it.
That's awesome. So we're gonna get back into the episode here, and basically we go to Navarro, and we see the old armory, the old Mandalorian armory, and we see that there's a whole bunch of the walrus men, I used to call them, the Pondo, whatever they're called. I apologize for being off my geek point on that one, but they were pretty scruffy looking. And they're gonna eat this rat type thing, and yeah, Cara Dune comes in as the marshal, and basically I thought that was a pretty good fight sequence.
Yeah,
to be honest, like it was surprising how physical she is, and we all know her background with MMA and whatnot, but I thought that it set the tone, and then we finally get the credits. Like this was one of the longest intro sequences to an episode that I think I've ever seen on The Mandalorian before we get that first credit. What we all think of that little roundup there, Ben? What you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like that scene, and the physicality of Cara Dune was great, and I liked how a couple of my friends are wrestling fans. They're big into professional wrestling, and they were like, "Look at this move and that move," and I don't know the names, but they did, and so they were like, "And she does that thing with the guy on her back," and I was like, "That's cool," So,
in the same boat.
So clearly, Carl Weathers, I'm sorry, I missed that. What was that?
I'm in the same boat. I'm like completely lost on the wrestling stuff. I didn't even think they were real moves.
Yeah, I'm the one who's the big wrestling fan, so I knew Phil was going to say something at some point.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, that's really cool, and I think that points towards like Carl Weathers being the director of that episode, because he understands physical movement in a scene, in a TV show or movie, and her making all those moves like that. Really, I think that really like raised the level of that scene higher than I would have expected in like just about any other thing, or with a different director probably. So yeah,
Boris, what moves did we have in that?
It's funny. I was actually thinking about rewatching it this morning and writing them down, but I don't recall everything. There was a lot of triangles, a couple arm bars, couple reversals in there. It was actually, I gotta say, overall, it was really well choreographed. I really enjoyed it. They really finally got to show, what she's made of and what she brings to the table. In terms of her MMA background. So yeah, I overall really, really like that opening fight. And it's very rare that we actually get physical fight scenes in any Star Wars media. Yeah. So actually seeing, a non-blaster, lightsaber fight was actually really cool.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. It made it nice and real, right? And it was like a meerkat. I'm sorry, the name had slipped my mind. The animation on that thing was a little weird for me, but it was okay. Like there was points at which I'm like, is this thing stop motion, or it's twitchy. It's definitely weird.
It felt very like 1980s Star Wars, like Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. Like, or the thing that really jumped in my head was the Ewok adventure, like level of like animation for the little twitchy creature, which I like as an adult who loved all those things as a kid. I was like,
yeah. I still maintain that I think the reason that they use a lot of robots and animatrix and things like that is because of just the backlash that the Star Wars movies, the prequel trilogy got with like just so much CGI to the point where they even CGI'd fruit in Attack of the Clones. Like, why? Why did you have to CGI fucking fruit? There was no point to do that. So I think they're really like taking a step back and trying to get like that more realistic look and feel wherever they can with this show. And, you know, budget-wise, it's probably cheaper to dig out old skeleton robots and whatnot.
Yeah, it was nostalgic. I think Ben really hit it there. It actually beats on a nostalgia drum for me, where I'm like, yeah, I remember when those bad ABC movies were out with the Ewoks, and I have them on DVD, believe it or not.
Yeah, same.
But it's one of those childhood memories, and for a minute there, I was like, you know, analytical brain was going, oh, that's a bit cheesy. And then, like, nostalgia Phil, 13-year-old, is like, no, this is perfect. It's a meerkat. Oh, I'll give him cuddles. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I wanted to add one more thing.
Yeah.
Is that when you mentioned, or when Boris mentioned, like, the special effects, like, I watch Corridor Digital a bunch, and they talk about the FX artists react to good and bad effects. And one of the big things is they talk about, like, weight in, like, you know, the weight of an object in a scene, and like if it feels real in the scene, and like that fruit from the prequel where it doesn't feel real at all. There's like no weight to it, no realistic motion. And then you have this meerkat who's kind of janky, but like he's there. Like your lizard brain knows that creature is in the shot there. You know, you can see the way the light plays on his fur and all that stuff.
Yep.
You know, like subconsciously.
Yeah, and Ben, you know, then that brings up another point. You know, when we think about special effects and CGI in movies, it's not the good CGI that you tend to remember. It's the bad CGI that you tend to remember. You know, like all of the prequel trilogy and all of the quirks and bad CGI they had. Mummy Returns, when the Scorpion King / The Rock shows up, aka when they ran out of budget, I'm sure. You know, we don't remember the amazing CGI. We always remember the shit ones. So that's just another thing I wanted to bring up, which made this scene kind of that much more impactful for you guys and myself to a lesser extent.
Yeah,
you're not a giant meerkat fan.
I'm neutral on that one.
All good.
It's very Clash of the Titans. I remember that when I was a kid, right? And I was like, oh my god, it's so terrible, but you ate it up.
Yeah, Harryhausen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention a little touching part of the opening sequence, and that was when Mando was drinking and he was lifting his helmet with. Oh Yoda.
Yeah.
Now that I bring up because does that signify that what Bo-Katan had talked about is maybe affecting Din, in that he's now, because the child's look when he's looking up the helmet, you know, you can see the kid is getting an eyeful of his face. And is he softening on that front? Is he accepting the idea that he might be able to take his helmet off whenever the heck he wants now? Or at least playing with that idea? I think it definitely points towards an internal conflict. Like the writers took the time to put that in the scene, right? So it's at least the very much that he's struggling with that sort of thinking, right? But also that scene works great because it's a father and son or father and child, you know, sort of showing how like children mirror their parents, and how when they're both drinking, you know, and like the kid would watch him, and then when he'd start drinking, you know, and how, you know, very much he's picking up on what Jen is doing. Exactly. Boris, do you think that it might be that Pedro Pascal just wants to take the freaking helmet off?
I was honestly thinking that the entire time. And I think, like, you know, I think it's a combination of storytelling, of where they want to go with his character, and partially kind of like the actor himself, kind of like, hey, he's going to at some point be able to take off his helmet more. But overall, I do think that it has a lot to do with last week's episode, kind of bringing in this, we have this internal conflict with him. I also think that, you know, the child is kind of like a, you know, part of him, this father-son type relationship, so he feels a little more comfortable, even removing a small part of his mask or helmet. So I think there's a lot going on here, and I'm really interested to kind of see this internal struggle continue, because obviously what Bo-Katan said last week really, really rang a bell with him.
Yeah, and I want to point out something that Ben said, because I think that it's so important. They gave the screen time. Like, the writer wrote it, and they gave it screen time, so that it's not us reading too far into something. I think it really is. It's placed, and it's placed there not by accident. They used up valuable time. They used up valuable film to put this thing to screen and publish it. And I think that there is a message in there.
Yep.
Beyond Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% there.
So yeah, and I'm excited about the implications of it. Like, maybe it is nothing. Maybe it's just that touching moment between father and son. I do notice that one of the themes is Baby Yoda got to eat. Like, that's
Right.
one of the biggest takeaways this season is, like, we're going the whole gambit of bodily excretions, and I don't know that I want to see a Baby Yoda diaper change, but he is consuming a lot and seemingly getting bigger. He seems to be getting a little rotund. So maybe all those eggs, who knows? So we finally get this Razor Crest down, and we get into it with Grief and Cara Dune there, greeting Mando, and this very grandfather moment with Carl Weathers grabbing the child, and is he treating you right? And like the baby is just really getting a lot of not even saying much, but articulating an awful lot through sounds and gestures and whatnot. You can see the genuine and the fact that he's comfortable with Carl and remembers him. And it's funny, it's a puppet, as we all know, but it's really bringing a role to this. What'd we all think of that, Boris? How would you make out with the reuniting and and this would be the end as well. I'm just going to throw this in there. This would be the end of all the episodes in the opening trailer.
Yeah.
So after this episode, I don't think that we've seen anything that hasn't been seen. Like, it'll all be fresh.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to point out, just because of what we assume is going to happen in the next episode or two. But going back to this specific scene, I really enjoyed that, the family is reunited, and like you said, there's a lot that the child says without actually saying anything. As the child was being asked, is he treating you right? I don't know why, but I feel like the body language of Mando at that point was very much like, oh, stop embarrassing me, I'm treating him well type thing. Kind of like, how you would react when your parent asks your child, their grandchild, hey, is your mom, dad treating you well? So I kind of like that, like, play on stuff. And yeah, it was kind of like that everyone's reunited. The band is back together. So it really led to a feel-good moment. Because overall, this show, when you think about it, doesn't have too many feel-good moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and this was really getting back to season 1.
Yeah.
I think with
that
comfort level. Ben, how did you enjoy the reuniting? The what did you feel at that moment? What did you think you were gonna feel? Like, we knew it was inevitable.
I mean, I loved just the landing, the craft landing, and it being all janky, and not the pad in the back, like, not coming down all the way, and just him having to, like, jump off of it, and them just, like, laughing at him, right? And then you can definitely tell Jon Favreau is a parent, and that moment with Grief Karga and the baby is like 100%. Like, I've been there, with my kids and my parents, and and it's like, okay, Grandma, go take the kids off to be spoiled.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
fine. Exactly. That sort of moment. Yeah. So I love that. I love that bit.
That they walk through the city and they get to where the shootout happened, the old bar. In the background, there's a statue to IG-11.
Mm-hmm.
Really subtly placed in there that I got
so
off of
good
the screen grab. And I'm like, oh man, I missed that the first time around. And they get in there, and this is where those audio subtitles really became interesting for me, because I could read what the droid was saying as they placed the child in the chair. And really, they're going over a heck of a lot of Solo movie stuff with the Maelstrom and Kessel and trade routes. And wow, I'm like, oh, this is like super greasy nerd stuff happening by this, like, and I even think it was voiced by one of the people who did Solo robot voicing as well, because it sounded very familiar, right? So
oh, go ahead.
No, go.
I was gonna say it reminded me of like I almost felt like one of the Star Tours type like robot bits where, and it's just like that, like kind of in the background. It doesn't seem important, and then the way they were presenting it too, it's like a kid's school lesson. But then you listen to the words and you're like, oh, they're talking about all this the important stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. There was a lot more packed in there than I thought, and naturally we have the child doing this again. I'm just amazed at how far the actual puppeteering is getting with him, because we have the child gesturing and having a full-on conversation through sounds like hey and stuff like that, where he just wants this cookie. And I feel bad if that kid's on Twitter, because the kid who's like, no, I'm like thinking, I hope there's no fan backlash to him. He's doing a part, like, and it's probably breaking his heart in that moment.
Yeah.
Even deny this puppet this food, right? And he's eating it all messy. I can't help but notice the crumbs on the kid's face and just that detail. And then Baby Yoda breaks out the Force and goes, gotta eat. And wow, like I was so happy with that decision, with the fact that the child didn't pass out after using the Force. Like, it's showing that he's starting to master this a little bit. He's able to achieve his goals through the Force.
Yep.
And and he's not got anybody teaching him other than the moral teachings of Din Djarin, right? Where he's like, no, don't eat those eggs. Behave this way, not that way. But he's getting no formal training. So I thought it was a great sequence. What did we all think about it? Boris, did you have thoughts on this thing?
Okay, so first off, when they drop him off in this classroom, I thought it was really cool just to see a classroom like, hey, kids in this galaxy actually do go to school, and they don't get killed when they go to school all the time. So that was cool to see. The part that really kind of made me go, was when Mando was walking away and he kept looking back. It was kind of like that, hey, that first day of kindergarten with my child. I don't know how I feel leaving him there. Meanwhile, the child doesn't give a crap. He's more interested in the cookies at this point. So that was like that paternal instinct, that father-son relationship that's an ongoing theme throughout this season. So that was really cool. And like you mentioned about the whole cookie scene, Jim Henson would be super proud of the puppeteering that they're using in this show. The amount of the range that they're getting from a doll is insane. Like, I have to always remember myself, this is a fucking doll, and they're getting like this just range of emotion from us, the viewers. And throughout this episode, I think that's what we saw. But, in this scene specifically, it was really cool to kind of see how the child was able to interact with someone, have a back and forth with someone, literally using noises and gestures, and then seeing him use the Force to get the cookies, to eat, and kind of like that happy moment when it's like, I got my cookies, fuck everyone, leave me alone. I really enjoyed that.
Man, Baby Yoda is like really holding it down in your mind. Fuck everyone, I got cookies.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, the little bugger's gonna make blue poo. Like, did you have any takeaways from all that, Ben? Or
I mean, what Boris said is, pretty spot on. I mean, they talk about like 2 or 3 year olds being like little sociopaths sometimes, and that's because they don't really know how to act, and so they're just feeding their animal urges, like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm uncomfortable, so yeah, I thought that was a great scene with him just like using the Force for things that you don't use the Force for, or a Jedi or a Sith would never really consider using the Force for. So I thought that was great. That was I loved every moment.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. It would mark the first time that we've seen younglings on the screen not getting killed by Anakin.
Schools are safe in this New Republic, guys.
Hashtag Sith free zone. So yeah, and considering all the chaos that happened in that space, it was good to see it reclaimed and done like that. We move on to our introduction to Mithril, which we saw in the first chapter. He was the guy that Mando put in carbonite. He expunges himself quite visibly on screen when he sees Din Djarin, and starts complaining that his left eye is lost, still doesn't have vision from the carbonite freezing, which was a great callback to Return of the Jedi when Han Solo got out of the carbonite himself. You know what? I've seen some backlash early before. I know we all kind of agreed on the internet to not do our spoiler reviews until the Mondays to give people the chance to watch it, but I have seen a few objections to the use of him as comedic relief. So I watched the episode, and thought, I think that it's a good dynamic. Ben, what do you feel about Mithril coming back and his kind of awkward, I don't know, character in the interplay? Carl Weathers constantly telling him, we'll put you back in carbonite, that type of stuff.
I mean, I think it's an interesting dynamic, and I think interesting dynamic in that it's definitely not a great place for his character, right? Like, he's in a bad spot. He did screw up, and now he's paying the price for it, and that's not necessarily like justice, right? Either. Mm-hmm. And Carl, or Grief Karga's character, I shouldn't say Carl Weather, because Carl Weather's the actor. Grief Karga's character is clearly not 100% like on the up and up. He's not, an upholder of peace and justice necessarily in the galaxy. He's, the leader of this planet now. But is he going to be a good leader or not? The way he treats Mithril isn't necessarily a great indication of that. But I also think it's interesting the character being like, he can slice stuff, and so he was definitely, there was a few funny moments. There's also, it's abusive for his character as far as how Grief treats him and all that. But it's also it gave a good. I thought it was an interesting dynamic in the scenes and the base later on, with him being clearly a non-combatant, and you've got the drop trooper and you've got the old bounty hunter, right? Like running even after Mando's gone, and it's just the three of them, and you can see how each of them react in the fight scenes. And I thought that was a good dynamic and an interesting take. So
yeah, for sure. Boris, what do you think of old Mithril coming back?
It's always cool to see characters from previous episodes make a reappearance, and to me it makes sense. Like, he ended up in Carbonite, he ended up on the wanted list for a reason, so now he's naturally paying off his debts to society in this role, and as a comedic relief, he kind of was in the first episode. He wasn't entirely a serious character. He was cracking jokes as he's like trying to spare his life and not be taken in. So I don't see the difference in character from his first appearance to now, and it just makes sense. And you always need someone who isn't a combatant in these types of episodes. That's the trope. We just needed him there.
It was nice. I get tired of the people trying to say, well, he was no C-3PO. Well, that's good that he wasn't, because Anthony Daniels is C-3PO and he's deadpan. Yep. And that's a play. But this guy is his own character.
And what gets to me is that people who constantly say that he's no C-3PO are the first people to complain that Star Wars is the same thing over and over again. But yet here are these people constantly making comparisons to, A New Hope and what A New Hope was, and not giving the opportunity for us to get away from that model and formula, and now we have this, and it's like, guys, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. I'd love to see, like, to me, the funny thing is when he was explaining about why he was working in this off, it was clear, obviously, like, that Grief was, like, Grief caught him cheating him. Yeah. And then he put the bounty out, and I'm sure that when Mando took the puck for that bounty, there was Grief wouldn't have shown any emotion about it, but I'm sure there were fireworks in his head, like, go screw him up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this guy, I've got skin in this one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm just thinking to myself, it'd be great, those books that Jim Zub and everybody have contributed to, where from a certain point of view on X movie, it would be great to get like a season 1 Mandalorian from a certain point of view, where it's like somebody does like what Grief is really thinking, like, you know what I mean? About, go get this mithril douchebag. He's really just messed up my books, and I've got the Empire breathing down me and all this stuff,
Yep.
It was a funny little side thought that I had from as creative as I get, right? So we basically get the assault, the siege. They go, they do their thing, and I found that this was all pretty mindless. I texted Boris because I couldn't help but laugh again at Mithril. I think this is what endeared him to me. When he finally gets into the place and Mando uses his jetpack and falling stormtroopers, all that stuff. But when he gets onto that platform, when he wants to turn the cooling off, and it's a setup, just like A New Hope.
Yeah.
And there's no guardrail. This is observation. Absolutely killed me, because I'm like, Dave Filoni is a Star Wars fan. And 100%. So is Carl. And the fact that line was in there is 13-year-old me is like, yeah, where is that guardrail, the Death Star? Why is all this stuff exposed, right? Like, why is everything like feel like a dare in Star Wars? It's like there's no health and safety committee.
You got to build stuff fast, right?
In America, there's no OSHA in the Empire, right? So
there you go.
Right. No. It's a great moment, and I'm really happy that Favreau put that in the script there, and just that long shot of him like looking down into the lava, like made my feet tingle for a moment, for just like, oh, we're so high. It was just the way they framed the scene and everything, and him like leaning back against the generator, or what? Yeah, the generator, the machine, right? Whereas like the shot with Obi-Wan is he's very calm and collected, and he just walks out there like it's no big deal, and he's facing the thing, not even looking at the drop, and Horatio Sands' character is just like backing across it, like, I am a person who could die at any moment in this terrible situation.
Yeah,
it was great.
Oh my goodness! So, we get the inevitable rushing through the shootout, and the realization that basically they get to a point at which they come across 2 scientists with the cloner badges on, or similar cloner badges. And there's that shootout with them. Now, I want to make the observation throughout all this that, and I think this is important for what we're going to discuss. These 3 are, well, I say 3, there's 4 of them. They're just cutting through the stormtroopers like there's nothing happening. Like there's no opposition. These guys are just butter, like a hot knife through butter. They're just shooting the wild. They're not hitting anything, but our heroes, our protagonists, are just nailing them left, right, and center. And we get these two scientists, and they're trying to cook the books, so to speak, to get rid of all the evidence. And they're rushed. And then we see on the one wall, Din Djarin takes notice of what looks like, and I hate to say this, but I love to say it, it looks like Snoke.
Yep.
It looks like a Snoke clone.
Yep,
100%.
And it's so exciting to me as a Star Wars fan to think that we're going to get some linkage. We're going to get some backstory. We're going to get explanation off of where that sequel trilogy kind of failed. And,
Mhm.
Everybody wanted to know Snoke's origins, and they let us know, but it was kind of felt cheap.
Yeah.
And now
Right.
we have John and Dave that are going to be like, hold my beer. Like,
Yeah.
we're going to at least give you something to talk about. Like, what did you guys think when you saw all this? Like, for me, my mind was exploding with, what the hell am I seeing? And then it goes back and like starts to the reel starts going in my head, and I'm like, oh no, like this got fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you think, Ben? Like,
Well, so the first time I watched it, I was like, are those like Yoda clones, or are those like yeah, I knew they were like too big. I was like, so I wasn't like completely sure. And then I was like, I mean, it could be Snoke, but that's like what, 30, 25 years in the future sort of, or something. And I was like, I wasn't sure. And then I went to go watch it the second time. And when I went to watch it the second time, right before that, a friend of mine messaged me and was like, that's the Snoke theme they play when he's looking at the tanks. And I was like, what? So I go back and I watched like that specific part again, and then I went and like played the music for John Williams' theme for Snoke, and I was like, oh my gosh, it totally is. And that could, it could be them like red herring again, screwing with us, but I kind of doubt it. It like that one figure that they show close up, the way the head is malformed, and look, that kind of felt like it could be a Snoke. So or an early failed Snoke, right?
yeah. Boris, would you?
So here's the thing. This happened at about 3:40 in the morning. I had my phone in hand and I was going to text you, and I'm like, who the fuck texts someone at 4 in the morning? Mind you, we do half the time. But I stopped myself because I didn't want to give anything away. Obviously, I don't even like saying whether I liked the episode or not sometimes. I try, I hope that you message me first so that we can discuss. But I was in shock because I feel like this is exactly what we wanted to see, kind of the origin stories. I also think that this is hilariously kind of, Lucasfilm backpedaling and trying to justify and explain, Palpatine and kind of Snook's origins and how everything combines and played out. So, this is them kind of making reparations in that sense with the fans, but it was a shock. It was for sure a shock. I did not expect that anywhere, and I just love the fact that this unassigned, unmarked building that's where they are. They're kind of like, the Enron offices back in 2000, whatever, trying to feverishly hide everything and burn stuff. So it was really cool how they were able to kind of do all that. But yeah, it was just a shock. And I had to stop, catch my breath, rewind a couple seconds, see that again. And I picked up on the music part at that point, and I'm like, holy shit, this probably is, the origins of Snook. So I'm like, fuck, here we are. Now I'm beyond invested. The story does take another tangent, but, I feel like this story is this show is really becoming the launching pad for a lot of the Star Wars story between the trilogies.
Oh, big time. Like, and you guys are absolutely right in pointing out the music. And I think that's one of the biggest tells in this series overall. When we think back to the first season, episode 5, I believe, you heard the spurs when the Boba Fett spurs, when the guy walks in and finds the body of the assassin at the end of the episode, and we all kind of collectively go, that's Boba Fett's sound.
Yeah.
And they confirmed it in the Disney Gallery, where they say the audio is one of the most telling components of storytelling in The Mandalorian. And Ben, you're absolutely right, because I had forgotten to mention that about that audio cue. And it's so important, so subtle. But it is that. Like, it definitely pushes us into that territory, whether or not they follow up on it, whether or not they fulfill it, or maybe they just basically light the fire and go, hey guys, this is happening.
Yeah.
Like this, here's a little bit of what's going on. And maybe the child's part of this play, obviously, with its, because they mentioned the the midi-chlorians, the M count. They avoid using the bad word,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty funny. It's like the M count is high.
Yeah. I love that.
Because they pull up that recording and it's only 3 days old, and obviously it establishes that Moff Gideon is still alive. It's Din Djarin's first like realization, like, oh crap, I'm compromised potentially because I left the child outside of my, normally protective supervisory role. I left the child exposed. I have to get back there. And it was great too, because of that family that he's with. Kara and all them are immediately like, use your jetpack. Get the hell out of here. Get back there as quickly as you can. Right? And get that's our number one priority. We'll figure out the rest of it. Leave it with us. Which I think was a great story decision, because I got to feel like in that time of crisis during that big chase down and using that transport from, the troop transport that they find out in the bay was also a great callback to 1977 Star Wars toys that never really got included. I know it was in Rebels and whatnot, but I just loved that whole ship. Excited me.
Yeah.
And that whole sequence, right, with the speeder bikes reminiscent of Return of the Jedi. Like, everything was just really working for me at that point. And then even to the point where we get the TIE fighters. Again, more of those special fold-down wings. And that iconic sound just gets you all, like, Star Wars sweaty.
Yeah.
Boris, did you get... I could only imagine you at, like, 3 of the... like, almost 4 of the morning, like, oh, we got it going on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I had to spend some time alone in the bathroom, that's for sure, after watching this. No, but like seriously, I think that's one of the things I wanted to point out was, hearing that TIE fighter sound effect, that sound effect is used nowhere else. That is a TIE fighter, it's such an iconic sound, and hearing it here in this chase and throughout the show or this episode was really, really cool. I just like this entire chase scene. It's like, who doesn't love a classic chase scene? And then a chase scene in the Star Wars universe where you have, these iconic vehicles. It was just so much fun. Like, it was such a good scene. And, even seeing them, like, just traverse through everything. Like, we don't see Mando, we don't see Din Djarin at all throughout this, so that was kind of cool as well, because the focus is here. They're trying to get back to the city as fast as they humanly can, with the Empire literally, on their tails. I really, really liked it a lot.
Ben, what do you think? Did you have fun watching that one?
I did. I saw the tank at the beginning, and I was like, it's Chekhov's tank. They're gonna do something with that tank here in 20 minutes or so, and I like immediately I saw that and I was like, is that the old toy? One of my friends had that one, and I remember us like playing with that as kids. But like, just that was such a good seeing the sound, and like even the running through the hallways, like running fights, like I mentioned earlier with Horatio Sands' character, like not being a non-combatant, how he acted in those scenes was great, because when you have a fight, like really good fight scenes, like movies like John Wick and whatnot, or like Captain America: Winter Soldier is also an excellent thing where you tell a story through the fight, how the people fight and how they act in the fighting is so important. To have a really good fight scene versus like, I like the movies, but the Bourne movies, a lot of the fight scenes are just like filler. It's just like frenetic, and it doesn't tell a story or reveal the characters at all. And I think that was a great moment in the tank with like Grief Karga and the guns and Cara Dune driving and how they interacted in those shots, and just like, Cara Dune being ruthless for the Empire with the one guy on the speeder bike to the right of her and just like slamming him into the wall without, even a second thought. And Horatio Sands' character, whose name I cannot remember, just being like shocked in that moment, like, and that she would do something like that. And her just like not flinching at all. Yeah. And just, and I loved, Grief Karga, a little slow now as an older guy, like just missing all those shots and his screen is full of TIE fighters and he's missing them. But it was great. The tension was fantastic because of how they built that, and the fact that like Mando's not the character in that scene, and we're caring about these three characters who they've, in season 1 they did a great job of building up, and in this episode too, where they're like building out that world, right?
Yeah, and I just love that retro display too.
Right.
How it was like that was, to me, again, as a kid, that was cutting edge, and then it didn't age well. But they don't care in Star Wars. They don't retcon it or make it something different. They go, no, damn it. That's the way George saw it. That's the way the technology was in the 70s and early 80s. And we're going to continue that tradition.
Yeah.
Right. And even to the point where it's that guy with the grenade and it's like a stick figure on the display, or the really poly triangle kind of build up of it. And I'm like, oh man, that is so cool. Like, I know it's going to happen, but.
And I don't know if this is the case, but that shot with the guy and the, with the grenade, like it made me, it felt like it was like a callback to Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade with the tank scene.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought.
I was like, that's, that was, that moment. I was like, oh, that was great. So.
Hey, when you got the catalog.
Nazis, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's. George wasn't so subtle.
Right, no.
It's so funny. And then we finally get them breaking towards the city, and then we get that Millennium Falcon moment, right? When the Razor Crest is there, and it's just like you can't help but not actually cheer in your mind or physically or with your family watching that, here's Din Djarin and the music's on point, the action's happening. And he's just mercilessly taking these things out. And there's so much meme in this cockpit kind of cuts, because the little baby Yoda still got his cookies. Yeah. And he's got his arms up and he's going crazy. And he's got, the puke coming out of his mouth because of the spin. And I just, I'm like, you guys win the internet for another week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just well done. I don't know if they're planning this or if they just go, oh, wouldn't it be cute if the puppet does this? Can we try it? Can we screen that? And then it's like,
just a ploy to sell more toys. Now you're going to have action Baby Yoda, roller coaster Baby Yoda.
My wife and I looked at each other. Mine's in the other room, mine's in the other room. But my wife and I looked at each other. That minute that second he spit up, and then Jen just turned around and saw it and used his cape. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Not like something else, but his cape to wipe it up. Right. I was like, that is 100% a parent moment.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. I have done that. Whatever's handy, the edge of my shirt to wipe and him holding the sleeve of cookies and then the cookie, and I was like, it's like he's got crackers in a juice box. Yeah. And he's in the back of the car, in the back seat there, and I'm looking back, making sure they're okay, and while I'm doing something really important as well. But that was, and just him, on the roller coaster, thinking this is hilarious, and it's a life and death situation, and you're just like, oh yeah, kid.
So much fun. And we finally get Mando taken off. And then we have our friend Carson comes in, Carson Teva, which is played by Paula Lee from Kim's Convenience, who is in the Spider episode. The X-Wing, the Rebellion are there. They've come by and they're like, hey, look, was the Razor Crest here? You know what I mean? And then Grief is providing cover, right? And he's just like, no, my droid, it's an old droid, everything pre-Empire. And the funny thing is that actually it was Mithril that was processing the Razor Crest into the data banks in the opening when Din Djarin came in. So it didn't even have anything to do with the droid, which is why he's looking incredulously at him like, are you serious? You're not going to tell him that this is happening?
Yeah, that was such a great little...
I liked it. And I really liked having Polly back on the show, too, because I think the fan reaction, beyond him having his already be famous because of a regular spot on a show that's, you know, cross borders and really become a cultural phenomenon. We have him really following in his passion. And I know he's a local Toronto guy, so I obviously have to plug him here because he's such a fantastic actor and whatnot. And I think it's great to see him, you know, doing these spots in the show. Like, I just genuinely love seeing new characters in Star Wars. And he gets to go to Cara Dune, and he's just like, hey, look, you know, I heard that you were on Alderaan. You have this great record of being a drop trooper, and we could really use someone like you. And she's, you know, not really interested. And he leaves her a badge, which to me tells me this could be the start of that rumored Cara Dune series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have a kickoff point now that if they choose, they could not do it. But if they choose to do it, she could just replay that conversation in her mind and decide to act on it if life gets a little too boring where she is.
Exactly.
It could be a Gunsmoke, a Marshall Dune, traveling the Outer Rim, cleaning up.
Exactly.
And it's exactly positioned like that, right? Because he's talking about how much is happening in the Outer Rim, and, you know, obviously they're being discouraged. Like, if you ever get out here again and stuff like that, like, go back to your civilized, go back to back to your capitals and whatnot. And they establish, I forget the name of the planet now, but it's the one that gets taken out in Force Awakens. You know, like the rebellion has gone on to get off a Coruscant and move the capital around. And I just thought that was a fun little interplay. And the meerkat again on screen. I don't know if we're going to walk into stores and get meerkats everywhere. Creepy animatronic meerkat.
Yep.
So did you guys have any takeaways from all of that? Like, aside from the visual and the plain stuff that I kind of caught?
I think that was like straight up. I mean, the only thing about the coin is that, like, it felt like a military campaign coin type thing. Like, I have a couple of friends and, you know, that are vets, and like that whole thing about giving someone your coin, you know, kind of is a big, you know, like, nod to the other person, like you're the bomb sort of thing. So that he left that there for her, like, that seemed like a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And her just like staring at it. That's like the only thing I could add. You covered like everything I was thinking about. So. Yeah,
it was pretty straightforward. Boris, did you get anything? That's a good point though about the coin. That's because my brother has served and he gave me a coin. It's one of my prized possessions, so I get that.
All I know is that I want to see a web shorts of Paul Lee's character now. I have a feeling that we're going to constantly see him. He's going to be playing kind of like, you know that clueless detective who's kind of putting everything together in the background throughout the series. He's not really the main character, but he's you know, a secondary, tertiary character who's kind of slowly putting everything together. I have this weird feeling that, you know, he's going to play not a significant role, but a bigger role than what we're seeing. Because I think they're seeing, okay, the Empire's out here, you know, they're in places that they weren't before. So what are they planning? What are they doing? And what's happening with, you know, with this Mandalorian? Like, why is he with this child? What's going on here? So I think that we're kind of seeing another storyline play into all of this as well.
Yeah, it's a great kickoff point because, you know, you could almost put him and Trapper Wolf and whatnot into this idea that they're part of this squadron that's going to be given this section of the Outer Rim.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the Wild West, and they have to manage it and use their discretion like they have been doing, where they go, hey, Mando, guess what? We know that you helped us. And this is further evidence. Like, you took out that base. You know what I mean? Like, that was a real threat. And you took it out, and we know you did, even though your people kind of covered for you.
Yeah. But I just
get to the closing.
One last thing. I really enjoyed like that law enforcement kind of feel that scene had. Like, all right, everything already happened. We just need to, you know, file the paperwork. Just a quick little thing that I want to add there.
That's a good point. It wasn't just all run and gun. And we get to the flyover, like the closing shots where we have the Star Destroyer-esque, this cruiser, and we get that epic flyover like we do at the opening of all the original trilogy movies. That is where... And Spaceballs.
Yeah.
That's where my ears started tingling, where I'm like, oh boy, like this is happening. Because I knew that there was something weird about the mechanics look, right? And now we get, first off, slam with confirmation. He's planted a tracking beacon onto the Razor Crest.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the officer going in, and there's Moff Gideon standing in a room that has a definite vibe of shit goes down here. Right? Like, we're not messing around at this point.
All the red panels.
Yeah, there's that glow of red, there's steam, this is where something big is happening. And we get him cold as a cucumber. He's just like, here we are. Okay, yeah, when we have confirmation that the child's there, we're going to be ready this time. And in those things, like we talked about, Ben, in those little tells that go with descriptive audio, not only do we get the images of what's in these kind of booths, and they're very abstract. They're not direct, but they hint at a form. And then we get the descriptive audio basically saying that we have dark troopers.
Woohoo!
Right? I think this is the left hook no one saw coming. Like, the Snoke thing made sense in my mind. And that dark... Do you want to tell us a little bit about your own personal experience and history with this?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I was a teenager. It was either end of high school, beginning of college, and the Dark Force video games came out, and you play Kyle Katarn, who's like a gray Jedi. He's a Jedi, but he's also a scoundrel. He's like Han Solo meets, and he's got like minor force powers, but because he lives during, the whole original, the original trilogy era, he's, had to keep it all on the down low. And you don't even have like a lightsaber until I think like the second video game or something like that. But he's working for the rebellion to like figure out something that's going on, like some mission. The Imperial regiments are like trying to do something, and so he's been sent as like a scout to figure it out. And he's working for the guy with the really bad haircut from the I think it's the one who's like many Boffins died or something like that. I think it's that guy's line.
Oh yeah,
that's his boss. And you're playing. It's kind of like a Doom-esque or Quake style like video game, like that's the engine that you're playing on, and you're shooting lots of stormtroopers. But then like you start getting force powers and you start doing stuff like that, and that's really crazy. And then the big reveal is that they're working on like robots, like droids, to like make a new army to like replace all their lost stormtroopers, and they're all like black metal, and they look like T-1000 or T-100 Terminators sort of. And then you find out that not only that, but they're building this like lightsaber proof armor, which is what they it's cortosis, I think is the term. It's the staffs that they used in the prequel trilogies that those big droids that worked with General Grievous had, that like you would hit it with your lightsaber and then it would just bounce off of it.
Yeah.
And that's where that came from, like that material or whatever. They made it up in that video game. And then I think at least that's where it came from. And then they eventually have it where you've got like what we would call Inquisitors now, or like dark side users who get in that armor that they've developed for these robots. And then it's just a super powerful force user who's immune to Jedi, basically. And it's like the big bad guy, the big general who's like behind the whole project is your final boss in like the second video game, I think. And it's just this huge epic moment. And it's just crazy on all sorts of levels, because you're fighting in like a large like super Star Destroyer that's being destroyed all around you as you fight this one guy. And that was just I love those games. I played them all. And you meet Luke Skywalker, and like there's the later the Jedi Academy series and like all that story stuff, and that's just great too. So yeah it was a great moment.
The golden age of video games. But this was a reach back into Legends. Boris, did you see any of that coming? Were you
Who
excited?
did? If anyone honestly said that they saw Dark Troopers coming in the show, they're full of shit. One thing that I did want to point
100%.
out... Exactly. One thing I wanted to point out about these Dark Troopers is that they come in 3 phases, and from the silhouette, it kind of looked like they were in phase 2. They didn't really look the phase 1 Dark Troopers, but they look kind of phase
100%.
2, more phase 3. And I remember like back when I was younger playing these games, I used to call them Cylons because that's what they reminded me of.
Yeah,
like, they look like Cylons.
Right.
But they look like they're more advanced, and I'm kind of left to wonder, like, are they going to keep the phases in? I wouldn't be surprised for the simple fact that they're still in experimental phase. So I can see, right now they're in phase 2. They're still experimenting. Somehow Moff Gideon is going to get a hold of more blood, and they'll be able to expand into phase 3. So I have so many questions in regards to where what's going to be canon now. But yeah, no one saw this coming. I think it's a really cool direction. It adds so much more, and with the possibility of there being remnants of Jedis and lightsabers in this show, or now in the world, I think that it makes characters like Mandalorians and non-lightsaber wielding characters that are badass that much more important.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like, I and this really draws about some questions in my mind. Like, where are they going to take these Dark Troopers? How much are they going to adhere to Legends, and how much are they going to start spinning their own canon onto it? Is the blood related to them, or was that for the Snoke stuff? There's a lot of stuff at play now, and because it could be for these things too, right? It could be that these two projects merge at some point.
Yep.
And that's why Moff Gideon is so intent on this all happening. But I also think that this goes back to the point that I brought up earlier. The Stormtroopers simply aren't a challenge for our heroes. Right. And now I think they get a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Starting next episode, it's going to take the combined forces of Ahsoka and Din Djarin and whoever else appears in this next episode to fight off, or maybe even they may lose. Yeah. There might be damage to our characters.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I kind of jumped into what I think might happen next week.
That's fine. One thing I did want to mention was something that we've kind of learned about Moff Gideon through his limited appearances in season 1 was that while he is a part of the Empire, while he does follow orders for the Empire, he kind of has his own side gig, his own side mission. We still don't know exactly what his end game is. We don't know what he's building towards. But I think that's why we kind of see the Snook clones, and then we see the Dark Troopers, like where the Snook clones are kind of like the Empire's plans, but these Dark Troopers are kind of like off the books, his pet project type thing.
Yeah, almost like a Thrawn.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly,
right.
Exactly like that.
Yeah, and I was actually gonna say, Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy was a huge... people don't remember this, but there was nothing Star Wars, and then Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire, was the first one, I think.
Yep.
When that dropped in the mid '90s, that was just this huge moment for so many people, because everyone read them, and even people that weren't super Star Wars fans at the time read them, and it was oh my gosh, this is the beginning of something.
Yeah.
And then obviously it becomes Legends, and then he comes back in
Rebels.
Yeah, I was like, Clone Wars, yeah. But no, he comes back in Rebels, and and he is, and it's a remix, but he's still fantastic. And I think wherever Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau go with Dark Troopers, I'm on board, right? They've shown that they have the chops to move forward, and with the directors that they have, like Bryce Dallas Howard and Carl Weathers here, and just so many people that have just nailed it every time. I'm in. You don't have to convince me.
Yeah.
This is super compelling storytelling that's happening now. And I got to say, for Heir of the Empire, it was where I learned the word sardonic.
Yeah.
I think it's Timothy Zahn's favorite word in that trilogy. He said with a sardonic smile.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm got to pull out the dictionary on this one.
Right.
So, yeah. So I've given my little prediction for what I think is because I can only be vague on this one. I can't spot anything because now it's a wild card. Like we all know that from the rumors and from the interviews that Dave and John have given, that the second half of the season is going to be drastically different than the first half. So, does Din Djarin give the child to Ahsoka, and Ahsoka takes off to train him, and then Din Djarin's left with the Mandalorian issues and the Moff Gideon issues and all of that? Does he keep the child safe? Does he continue on with the protective father role? Those are questions that I have. Boris, what do you think is going to maybe happen?
Oh man, it's so much is possible. Like I said, this show has given us so much, and there's so many possibilities. And I don't want to call them red herrings, but there's so many points where they can kind of make spin-offs and their own stories. But I feel like some of them are going to come into fruition and some of them won't. And it's not because they're red herrings. It's just simply because they're not in the plans right now. But I do really think that we are going to see less of the child moving forward. I do think that we are going to deal with more of the Mandalorian and the issues, because his mission right now is to deliver the child to the Jedi, and then they can do whatever they have to do with it, right? Last week with Bo-Katan, that kind of set up a whole other huge issue from actual Bo-Katan's issues and her trying to get the dark saber again, to that hint that something's going on in Mandalore, because the Empire's kind of said, like, if you go there, you're dead. So it's there's so many places that we can go, and I think while we are going to see the child a little less, we are going to focus more on Mandalorian culture and going into Mandalore, which will then have more credence into having Bo-Katan and others, possibly other characters from Clone Wars and Jedi and Rebels join us. So yeah, I was very vague, but I feel like there's just so many directions that we can go in.
Ben, so I saw this look in your eye.
So I think that they're gonna get there, right? But like, this show has always been about like the journey, and like everything I've wanted to have happen, like it's like 5 episodes later, right? Like, and it's kind of, that's delicious in some ways, but it's also, it can be frustrating. But I think we're in the second season. They've approved a total of 4 seasons, and I feel like we're in the Empire Strikes Back. I mean, it's Star Wars, so it follows traditional tropes, people. Like that, it's storytelling rules. This is going to be the big bad. We're, this is part 1 of Endgame.
Yep.
Here, we're in the end game now, but no, like next episode, it's gonna be terrible. I think we're gonna see Ahsoka, and she's gonna get hosed because she's not expecting, Moff Gideon dropping on her, and I think he loses the child, and I think it's gonna be the rest of the season is him trying to get the child back, and Ahsoka helping him, and I think I know Ming-Na Wen is listed as being in this season, so I think she might be the Boba Fett / bounty hunter / maybe dark trooper, test pilot type person maybe, and she had some crazy cool armor on, and just I think that's what the season is going to be. Is like episodes 5, 6, 7, 8 are just going to be rough, and episode 8 is going to be them him with the child and maybe Ahsoka at the end, and then next season I think we're going to get the hopefully, I hope, I really want to see the Mandalore stuff, and I really want to see all of that come to fruition, and whatnot. So, and Return of the Jedi, sort of happy ending of a trilogy, and I bet they're gonna go. I bet they're aiming for 6 or maybe 9 seasons if they're lucky, right? I unlike the new trilogy, which had some great moments, I think the failure to plan each of the 3 episodes linked together, it was a big downfall, and I think Filoni and Favreau are very like aware of that, and how everything from the very beginning you could see in season 1, like how they planned it out, and they understood that foreshadowing is really important when you write and to tell a good story, and so they were able to do that where you have almost zero foreshadowing in the new trilogy because each movie is its own separate thing that doesn't connect.
Exactly.
Truly. Right? Like they do some like messing around to make it look like foreshadowing, but you can tell the man behind the curtain did not have that plan.
Yeah.
So that's my feeling. And as a fan, like, oh God, no. But as a writer, I'm like, oh yes, bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring on the darkness. So
I think that's a really valuable perspective, to be honest, because it's easy as a fan to just project what you want. But I think in your professional writing capacity, it's a dimension that sometimes we miss out on. And I think it's a very, very underappreciated and important kind of story to understand the storytelling structure. Ben, where can people find you? Like, I want to know, like...
You can find me on Drive Thru RPG, my Ben Woerner, Woerner. I'm published through Gallant Knights Games. So Alan Barr of Gallant Knights Games, they're all over on Facebook. There's groups and there's a Discord channel and all those different things. That's where I generally am at. And Knights of the Underbed is the latest role-playing game I put out, where you play stuffed animals protecting children from monsters and nightmares. A World of Dew was the first one I ever did, which was a samurai noir role-playing game. My love letter to Chambara Kira Kurosawa films. Nice. So, yeah.
Amazing. That's awesome. Boris?
Well, Phil, I think it's time. I think we've reached that time. We are, again, 90 minutes discussing a 40-minute show. I love it. And honestly, I really, I might make joke around, but I honestly love these roundtable discussions. I love hearing what other people are thinking about this show, especially people with proper credentials and fans. It's always a lot of fun just talking to new people. So Ben, thank you so much for coming on. And Phil, where can people find us?
Well, you can find us at www.itscanonpodcast.com. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at It's Canon Podcast. You can email us at show@itscanonpodcast.com. And you can subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, Amazon. Really, anywhere you find podcasts, you're going to find our show. So thank you so much for listening. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and also leave a rate and review for us. We greatly appreciate it and look forward to talking to you on the interwebs.
That's right. All right. It's the It's Canon Podcast. It was Monday. We talked about all things Mandalorian, Season 2, Episode 4, Chapter 12. It was a lot of fun. So thank you, Ben, for joining us. Thank you, Phil, for leading us in this discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Week to week. I think next week is a big one. And as always, we do have a guest lined up. But if you ever do want to be part of the It's Canon Podcast, just send us a note. We love, this is the whole point. It's a community. We're trying to build a community. We're just like you guys. We're fans of everything. So thank you to everyone who has been listening and, will continue to listen. He's Phil. I'm Boris. Good night.